Ben, would you say we're in a situation of the blind leading the blind now? Given that while remote working is the new normal, managers are blind to what employees are doing at any given moment, and employees are blind to what the managers are perceiving of them.
Being remote, you have much less of the verbal and visual cues when you interact with your managers, with your colleagues, with your direct reports, and so on. So it's very important to ask and to constantly ask ourselves the question, I would say, of how do we ensure that our people at large in the company are productive and engaged, but more importantly, remain productive and engaged. We are not really sure how long this will last. It started with 2 weeks, then it ended up being 6 weeks of pure lockdown, more in different locations and so on. So what's important is to first constantly think about and refine our value proposition so that it's sustainable, whatever we put in place. So for sure, there is the need to put in place a framework, and I think this framework should be complemented with a lot of behavioral tactics and practices, which I think Michelle will tell us a lot of great things about in a minute. And when I'm digging a bit more on the framework aspect, definitely there is a need to be agile. So a good way of being agile, for instance, is to implement OKR, so objectives and key results. And an OKR-based system actually is well supported and actually goes hand in hand with quarterly and very frequent reviews. So the idea is to say, okay, it's not about every year we do a performance review, which is like the dreaded experience for everyone. So managers, they don't want to do it. It's time consuming. They don't know what they will say. They know that they have to follow a curve to have some people properly rated and some others less, and so on. And employees, of course, they are a bit stressed because there is a lot at stake. And sometimes the objectives that are defined at the beginning of the year are not always relevant 12 months later. Talk about 2020, right? Who in December last year or in January, when defining the objectives, could have even imagined what was going to happen and how it would disrupt, I would say, the workplaces and the day-to-day practices. So this framework actually, be it OKR or not, but OKR is a proven tool that works. Always needs to be mixed between, I would say, mid-long-term objectives, so quarterly and so on, but also blended with day-to-day activities that are always aligned towards company goals. So it's very important to actually have this two-pronged approach, whereas it is, okay, you know where you're going, but you know pretty much the steps you have to take on day-to-day basis, on a week-by-week basis to reach those goals. So yeah, and that is the right direction actually to move away from everyone being blind.
Well, as Ben mentioned, that's having the right framework and also encouraging the right behaviors. Michelle, any comments on that?
Thank you very much, Sasha, and welcome everyone. I'll actually flash a framework that we have. It's really, even if you don't have a digital platform, which is what we use, these are the 3 best practices for leading without seeing. If I might just share that on the screen for everybody. These are some very basic principles of how to lead without seeing, and it's essentially a 3-pronged approach. Firstly, when certainty decreases, and that's certainly the case right now, you have to increase your two-way visibility as a leader within your organization. Secondly, it's really about focusing. To Ben's point about outcomes, he spoke about OKRs, and I'll show you a little bit about how we do it within the self-driven context for ourselves as well as our clients. And thirdly, the third step is really recognizing and rewarding desired behaviors. So what do we mean, firstly, about that first principle of increasing two-way visibility as certainty decreases? It's really about making sure that you appear more as people are more uncertain and there's so much information coming out. You have to come in front of your people more frequently to increase the alignment and the focus in the midst of the perhaps conflicting information that there may be out there. They shouldn't be lengthy communications. So it's not about having a town hall every week, 3 hours, but it should be frequently, and it should demonstrate empathy towards your employees, as well as focusing them towards business outcomes. And rather than it being just a top-down approach, you also want to create avenues for your people to be heard bottom up, even if it's done virtually. So I'll show you what we've done using our platform to affect these objectives. But as I said, you can go the manual route via, virtual calls, town halls, email communication, et cetera, et cetera. So within our platform, the self-driven platform, there is a sort of social media aspect, communications piece in which leadership can use it to send across announcements, news that they want people to focus on. So, for example, in the early days of the lockdown, when there was a lot of information about flattening the curve, leadership sending reassuring messages and call to action messages was very important. But as I said, it's not just about the serious stuff. You want to maintain that that sense of connectivity. So what we did was to encourage people to share their work from home, or in our case, work from mobile, anywhere, pictures. So we kind of got a sense of what people's home environments and working environments remotely were like, right? That kept a sense of bonding within us. And then to the point that I said about helping your people be heard virtually, because it's not just about top-down leading. You want to hear what your people are experiencing. We used the poll feature and the survey feature within our platform to ask people, do you feel you're more productive working at home or not? And the interesting thing that we found was that predominantly either people felt they were as productive or not, or more productive. But we did find a segment, about 20% of our population, who felt they were less productive. And so with that insight from this poll, we were able to then hold a virtual call and say, what exactly is it that is hampering you from feeling productive, for example? Is it, and the outcomes of that discussion were things like, I don't have the right monitor size, the ergonomics of my chair is not there. And so we were able to address those issues. But then it was also an opportunity for people to connect on intangibles. So in the very beginning of lockdown, some people who hadn't been working from home really didn't know how to deal with distractions like their kid. They didn't know how to deal with distractions like their fridge being in front of them all the time. And so we had consultants in our team who had been working from home for a while. They dealt with this, and they could share their tips. Put a picture of your of someone you don't want to be, your fat self, in front of the fridge, for example. To prevent you from raiding the fridge so often. This was a poll issued by the CEO, and some of the business leaders that I shared this with said, I'm already trying to keep my business afloat. Are you saying I also now have to be a social media influencer? And obviously, it's incumbent on leadership throughout the organization. It's incumbent on leadership throughout the organization to make sure that they participate in this communication. So I had to do my own polls about, what it is that people need to do to be the remote managers. The second principle, to echo what Ben has quite rightly focused on, is about outcomes, because people obviously will get distracted. And so you really want to be creating transparency and accountability by sharing your goals. So one of the tips that we want to give you is that have a stand-up meeting at the beginning of the week where you record your goals and share them once. So our platform, you can actually key in your goals and then share the screen. So literally you can provide visibility to every one of your team members. This is what I'm going to be focused on for this week. And it might not just be business goals. To Ben's point again about the little things that we have to do along the way to get the business outcomes. Things like still seeking out feedback from our peers as we go along and do those tasks, or requesting feedback from your peers, or the work from mobile quest that we issued out earlier. A quest for us is really a challenge that we issue out on our platform. Everybody does that, submitting a picture of their work from home setup, for example. And what happens is we assign experience points whenever somebody does that. So if you set a daily goal or you seek for feedback, you get awarded 1,000 points, which equates to, I believe it's 1 ringgit, right? And as you accumulate your points and as you tick off your goals, the system logs it in, and towards the end of the week or the following week, when you check in again, you have to flash on the screen exactly where you've got to. So that accountability of saying, I started off the week saying I was going to focus on this with these outcomes, and I ended the week ticking off all of these. I've not let anyone down. I've not got any red crosses where I was overdue and I didn't do what I said I would do, right? So that's one aspect. Not micromanaging, and to Ben's point, not installing invasive monitoring, software that doesn't necessarily work. And just on the aspect of outcomes as well, I think it's really important that you have a mechanism to break down your outcomes into actionable tasks. And so that's what we've done in this instance. If the intention for me, a goal was to have a certain amount of webinars in the month, so I would have a breakdown of how exactly, but then there would be aligned to an overall organizational a goal of what? Delivering high quality thought leadership content every month. It's not about holding a webinar for the sake of webinars, but really building thought leadership around our space. And I've assigned, my CEO to be the reviewer, and I can submit that to him. Just a little bit, I hope this is a little bit useful for folks out there who still struggle. I think a lot, in my background with talent and learning, a lot of people struggle with the concept of SMART goals. And OKRs as well. And I think when Ben, we go back to you, you can talk a little bit more about the OKRs, but certainly in our business, within the system, it's been built in that you can key in what the primary organizational goals are and what secondary organizational goals are. And as every employee keys in their goals, you have to align to one of these. So people stay very, very focused, that whatever they're working on does contribute to a larger objective, right? And then when we're talking about evaluating those outcomes, it's really about keeping in mind what are the outcomes, what are the indicators that would reflect the outcome, and who is in the best position to evaluate those outcomes, whether they be internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, your end user for the end of the day, right? Then lastly, before I hand over back to Sasha, is really the third aspect of this best principle of Lead Without Seeing. Once you focus people on the right outcomes and provided some visibility about that, it's really about recognizing and rewarding the desired behaviors, right? So if you see your team doing what they need to do to be agile and solution oriented right now, recognize it. It sends messages to others of what leaders are looking for, and you water what you want to grow. So within our context, we've got something called badges. And this is something that I got a long time ago from the CEO as an OCD badge, came with a nice message about how he appreciated my being OCD. This was pre-pandemic, so he doesn't appreciate me being OCD now because it affects my agility. So that's probably not a badge he wants to give in the current time. But there are other badges that you can create, right? Whether it's collaboration, for learning. And in one of our clients, what they created badges for was their core values. They needed to transition into a new set of behaviors because they switched brands. So they basically allocated badges for their new core values and allowed people to recognize peers, bosses, and subordinates whenever they saw a demonstration of that core value. And as a result, because this was all visible, they could have data to indicate 700 to 900 applications of core value behaviors in a period of 3 months, right? Again, those badges could come with or without employee points. And what these employee points, experience points all translate to, similar to your credit card, they can be redeemed for lifestyle rewards. And I'm not sure if everyone can see it or whether the screen is being blocked, but your employee points then translate to something as simple as a Starbucks voucher, a Grab food voucher. If you save enough points and, COVID is over, you might get to travel to Iceland if that's what your company's, sorted out for you. And there's a lot of flexibility in this because, especially when companies are cash strapped, sometimes they don't necessarily want to, put these kind of big ticket items. but they can still create rewards that are relevant to their employees. For example, if you hit a certain number of points, maybe Ben, as the CEO, will write you a wonderful LinkedIn recommendation. Wouldn't you love that, Sasha? Ben basically saying Sasha's like the bee's knees in marketing. Like, I don't ever want her to leave, but if you want the best marketer out there, she's your girl. And yes, so this is just a sort of a three-pronged approach to leading without seeing.
Back to Ben. So in the OKR context, how do employees, or even with what Michelle has shared, with like weekly goals being set, and at the end of the week you report back, but how in the day-to-day, every single day, how do employees prove to managers that they are on track daily? Because managers will want to know if the employee is contributing every day, and also if there are any issues or hiccups, right, along the way, so that they can address it, so that potentially you could still hit the goal at the end of the week. Ben?
Actually, it's extremely important to have the right system in place. So Michelle just mentioned it, and it's also what we help basically companies to implement in a turnkey manner. So it's very important to have the right system in place that will bring and that will foster transparency and accountability. Just on those two terms, they are very actually important. Transparency really doesn't mean, and it's back to what we were sharing earlier and so on, transparency really doesn't mean over control, micromanaging, and so on. Transparency basically means communication, genuine communication, so that people on any side, on any role in a team or in a company, know what they have to do, but know also what to expect from others with the right level of information. So that's very important, that behind transparency and behind accountability, I really like a lot the very simple yet valuable word, trust. So I think any system that is put in place should always be based on trust. As soon as you stop trusting a manager or an employee or a colleague or whoever to not perform the work, to not genuinely giving his or her best, then in system will not necessarily work. It may be better going back to the invasive technologies and so on. But so as soon as there is the trust, and it's very, it's not natural for everyone, because we all come from companies, from background and so on, where sometimes there is a level of micromanagement, or sometimes there is a need for more micromanagement, more towards micromanagement. So in this case, it's very difficult to suddenly switch. I don't see my employees, I don't see my colleagues, and so on. I'm pretty sure they are just taking care of their children running around, which might be the case, in fact, but which is fair enough. And it's going back again to trust that they are going towards the outcome, that the desired outcome. So now back to the system itself. It's very important to know what are the desired outcome, and more important than that, it's important to know what are the milestones in terms of reaching progressively the final results. So I've seen some example on Michelle's slides. There were some objectives for more turnover, sales, and so on, which are very natural. So okay, you need to do 2 million more sales this year. Fine. From there, do you make sure that the employee in question or the team in question has the achievable small milestones and so on? So to say, okay, here are the building blocks towards 2 million more in sales. So it's very important that the system actually defines not only, again, the results, but also the steps being there and so on. And back to what Michelle has shared as well, it's very important that the system encourage the teams to be self-driven. So I think it's a very good.
Love it, Ben. Thank you.
No pun intended. So now it's actually very, very important, and the idea is that, again, it's not a matter of tools only. A system is not a tool. A system is a set of activities, a set of measurable objectives, a set of milestones, and all this together is put together, is tied together with communication. And that's where actually the tools come in. Communication about tracking historical information to understand what we did in the past to see what went well, what went wrong, what remains to be done, and so on. And that can only be done with the right tools. Because it's otherwise impossible to keep track of this Google Sheet here, this email there, this piece of paper, this Post-it that we have here, and so on. So it's important. While I don't believe companies can operate efficiently without the proper tools. I mean, we are using Zoom right now. What would have been possible without those teleconferencing tools over the last few months? So there is no question that the right tools need to be in place. But at the same time, for me, my most important advice, I would say, is to not 100% rely on the tools, and is to leverage the power that the tools are bringing by having the right practices, by having the right mindset all around to really make sure that in the end, people will be together towards a mission, not together towards using a tool. That's not the end goal in itself. However, it's one of the key building blocks towards achieving the company's objectives, but of course the individual objectives. It's a win-win for all in the end. You're happier doing your work, and the company performs in the end, and you're even happier because you might be rewarded. So yeah.
Michelle, when we were discussing and planning this webinar, we wanted to give people case studies, actionable insights. Can you share some specific case studies of where the right framework and tools resulted in the desired behavior?
I think I really want to. I thought what Ben said about not becoming a slave to the technology, but really leveraging on the platform towards the right outcomes is very important. So one case study I can share is with a regional financial institution that we worked with, and they came with this sort of big problem, right? Like, oh, we're not collaborating enough across the region. We are not innovating enough across the region. How do we solve for that? And innovation and collaboration, they can tend to become overused buzzwords, right? And you're like, yeah, everybody wants it. We don't really know, when it's not happening. We know when it's not happening, but we don't know when it is happening. Sorry, apologies. We know when it's happening. We'll recognize it when we see it, but between zero to hero, we don't know how to get there. And so in this instance, what we did was really reel it way back to basics. So in this instance, why were people not collaborating across the region? Number one, we dug deep into that. And what we found out was that people didn't know the other units. They had no idea what the other business units within that one function. It was a group risk function. So, under risk, you've got different types of risks. They had no clue what other risk units were involved in, what their KPIs were, et cetera, what they did. And so there was no incentive for them to connect, right? Like, if I don't know you, why would I call you, right? So the first thing we did was we said, let's create a challenge where we're all going to help educate each other about our respective units. And so the leaders of each unit were tasked to create bite-sized learning modules, whether it was a short video or an article or something about their unit and what they stood for and what their KPIs were and how they fit into the whole stream of things. So those bite-sized learning modules were put onto the platform. So it could have been a 2-minute video, right? They were also loaded up with a quiz, a very short, nothing too strenuous, 1 to 2 questions, testing people's comprehension on those quizzes. And the mandate was then, okay, Sasha, you're the leader of one unit. Benjamin, you're the leader of another unit. I'm the leader of another unit. We all have to make sure that all our team members consume each other's content and take each other's quizzes. And that becomes very visible, right? Like, okay, so how much are Michelle's team members learning about Sasha and Ben's team members' work? So that's something you can see very visibly on the platform, right? How many quizzes were put up, how many quizzes were consumed, what were the scores on the quizzes, and what happened at the end of the day. And what I might do is just quickly, because it's a case study, share with you sort of the outcomes of that particular exercise in terms of business results. So let me just bring you to the right one. So I think it's this one. Sorry. This is not the right one, but this one. So can everyone see this particular slide? So it was a regional bank. Firstly, key results were that we achieved 70% adoption of the platform in 12 months, which is amazing considering that whenever you have a new platform and system launched, it's very hard to convince people to log in and stay synergized. But this 85% stat is what I spoke about. 45 learning quizzes were user generated by the teams in group risk. This percentage of 85% is the percentage of overall employees who scored more than 80% in those quizzes. So what we've got is a lot of quizzes being self-generated by the employees, being consumed and actually being aced by the employees. So they got a much greater understanding of each other's product functions and KPIs, etc. And what that led to then was a greater degree of collaboration digitally across teams and countries. And for us, we measured collaboration by, an action needed at least two people, two to tango. So whether it was, someone posted and someone commented, someone sent something across, so that was how we measured collaboration. So there was an increase of 61%. And anecdotally, and also part of the whole engagement piece was, in order to increase adoption, we had a feature in our basic version, which is a stepathon. It connects to your Fitbit or your phone pedometer, and you can compete with others how many steps you do in a particular week. And so we had 72% participation rate across the countries in the steps challenge. And how this anecdotally contributed to collaboration was because it became such a challenge, and people would share like the most bizarre things, like, oh, these are the shoes that I wore when I was running that I hit my record this week, right? And then so somebody in Indonesia, for example, would see that someone in Malaysia is wearing the same brand of shoes as them. It suddenly becomes a talking point, and they suddenly have an incentive to pick up the phone and talk to each other because they feel like my bro, right? Like he knows the shoes to buy, right? And all this, it's because I think it's really important to Ben's point. It's not about fun and games and engagement and having Facebook within the business context, because as we know, especially in a remote working environment, there are far too many distractions already. So as a business owner, I don't think you're necessarily going to want to invest in a platform just to give your people more things to distract them. But if you invest in a platform and a methodology to help your people focus on the right outcomes, and then create visibility and accountability when people do that, and you're creating some little bit of FOMO, right? You don't want to be part of the group that's not participating in the quizzes or not ranking on the leaderboard as high as your other team members, for example, right? So these are some of the things that we think having the right framework to partner together with the right technology, leading towards solid business outcomes.
So when a lot of you signed up for this webinar, some of you included your questions or your intended focus areas. One of which was, how does leading without seeing apply to like cross-cultural, cross-border, and multiple time zone teams? So Ben, any tips or case studies to share?
Yeah. So to me, again, I like to be basic. I like to be simple. I believe that especially when it's something that we are not sure, it's important to accept that communications can be asynchronous even at work. Of course, it's important to set the right rules of engagement. So I'm not talking about too many rules or again micromanaging and so on, but it's fairly important still to know when to expect an answer from which colleagues or which location or which country, for example, during a specific time frame, which should be flexible in itself, but at least you are not the one stressing out because you are not receiving any news or any answer on the message you sent and so on. And even more when it's cross-country, cross-culture, cross-everything, it's the key is the balance between the rules and the flexibility. But in this case, I would insist on some rules, some specific time frames where you think employees should answer to each other, where you put in place some meetings that take care of the time zones of everyone. So we at BrioHR, we work with clients who have offices and subsidiaries in all the countries of the region in Southeast Asia. So they have 5, 6, 7 offices, and sometimes more. But the time zone is only a few hours apart. So it's fairly easy to find time for a regular meeting where there is everyone needed together on the call, on the conference, at a specific time of the week, at a specific time of the day, and so on. And I do think again that we've seen that again by being able to have all the information in a specific repository. BrioHR, SelfDrvn again, or any other tools, but I would recommend really one of those two. It's very important to once you have it documented, once you have those messaging capabilities, your commenting capabilities of what you did achieve today and so on, don't expect a real-time answer in the minute for everyone, depending on the time zones. Be okay with that, and instead plan a review call or even just a chat for 15 minutes every Thursday at a time that is convenient for everyone across time zones. We have other clients, they have companies, they have subsidiaries in Asia, but also in Europe, which starts to be very different in terms of the time zones. Yet, the maximum will be 6, 7, 8 hours of difference, depending on where you are. It works. It's 9 a.m., 5 p.m. It works. So it's really about being easy. It can always work well. I had a meeting earlier this week with someone in California. You find a way. You make it work, even if it's 15, 16 hours difference. So in my opinion, what's important in here, it's just to keep the communication more than ever, and then the tools, we have them. It can be Zoom, it can be Teams, it can be Google Meet, and so on. So just blend, as we were saying earlier, in the system that you are building. Just blend the tools, the practices, and tie it all with genuine constructive communication practices.
Right. So adjacent to that, Michelle, we received a question from an attendee in the sign-up form about how managers can lead while absent. For example, if a manager goes on leave, annual leave, extended leave, maternity leave, paternity leave, stuff like that. Any specific examples or tips on how to lead while absent?
The concept of really focusing on outcomes really applies here, because it shouldn't have to depend on who is managing you for you to keep doing the work. Obviously, if I'm going on maternity leave, work for my team still needs to continue, right? My life's so-called been put on hold because my baby's my time, but my team has their work cut out for them. So we're very clear on Priya, who report my team member Priya. She has specific outcomes that she needs to achieve. What are those outcomes? What are the success factors that will indicate those outcomes have been met? Who will be the right reviewers, apart from the direct manager, who will be able to say, yes, we've hit the success criteria for these particular outcomes. So Priya is, for example, my HR manager. Her main stakeholders would be employees. Perhaps an outcome for her was to make sure that this year's performance management cycle went off without a hitch. And so, it doesn't necessitate that I have to be around in order for those outcomes to be evaluated, right? As long as we're very clear, what are we expecting to see as success criteria? Who would be in a position to say, yes, she met it and didn't, and whether she did or not. So that's one sense. And I think another aspect of what we need to be doing in modern times is really leveraging on data to help us and technology to help us do the things that maybe slip through the cracks. So, for example, even if you're not on leave, because of the way that work is right now, most managers are up to their heads with their own headaches, right? They may not necessarily make time to do the necessary leadership behaviors like coaching their team members, or checking in on their mental state, or giving them a pat on the back, giving them feedback, or giving them recognition for a job well done. You're just literally waking up in the morning, powering through your million Zoom calls, and then knocking off at the end of the day, and you're not making time for those. But if you are smart and you can leverage a particular platform that can automate those things for you. So, for example, if your staff does hit one goal a day every day for the next 5 days, reward them with this, and it's automated. It's a rule, right? It's like your auto banking, like every month pay this if this happens. So you can set up those rules. So automated recognition. And another very big picture example, leveraging on technology. It's an end state that we're working towards with one of our clients. Because really the key, I think, to leading without seeing is to get as much help as possible. You don't want it to be manual. I absolutely agree with Ben that you've got to keep the heart in it. You've got to be human. You've got to be flexible and all the rest of it. But really, it's about leveraging on technology to help you get better decisioning. So, for example, one of our clients, they're in the food delivery business, food creation, food. They're a pizza outfit. I won't say who. And what it is they've made a massive investment in a data warehouse that basically generates reports on outlet sales, food costs, how frequently, how accurately on time their pizza deliveries are going out to market, etc. And those reports get sent to their store managers, I don't know how frequently, every week. But the fact of the matter is, the store managers are inundated with angry customers who are complaining because their pizzas haven't arrived. They don't have time to go through all these reports. And so that massive data warehouse is gone to waste. The end state that we're aiming to achieve with them is, if we integrate our system, our employee engagement system, with your data, what can happen then is, if a particular store has food costs going above a certain threshold, so we know that they're wasting food ingredients in some manner, we can just send a trigger then to that store manager. Your guys all need to go back to training 101, pizza making 101. They need to learn it 6 slices of pepperoni, not 11. Send them all in this week. And that becomes an actionable insight then that is automated, and people go through the training. You can track it on our system, and then you can see whether that translates into the required behaviors of food costs coming down. So I get it. I think leading without seeing, definitely you've got to have the heart. You've got to have that level of flexibility and understanding your employees are not going to be able to drop everything and be with you, but also thinking bigger and leveraging on technology. I would also add one more thing. I think when we're talking about being outcome focused, I think it's really important for us as leaders also to think that way. And the reason I say this is because I've seen instances where when leaders are not outcome focused and they're used to leading in a manner in which when they want to focus on something, then they need their entire team to be available to work on it with them at that point in time. And everybody needs to drop everything else, because I now want you to rally around me. And if I want Sasha's input, she's going to give it to me now. And if I want Ben's input, he's going to give it to me now so that I can do my work, right? And that's really, really very disruptive to everyone if that's the way that you operate. So as leaders in the new norm, you've really got to plan out what outcomes you want to achieve. What are the resources that you're going to need to achieve them within the stated timeline? Give them that heads up, as Ben mentioned. I'm going to give you this much time. Let's check in on a Thursday, 15 minutes at this mutually agreeable time. And that's how we do it. It's not about, guys, where are you? Where are you? Ping, ping, ping. I need you now. I need you now. And everybody has to drop stuff just to fit in with your schedule right now. So those are some of my thoughts on that, Sasha.
A few people who registered for the webinar all submitted similar questions around how do you give feedback to address poor performance or non-delivery of work, especially as it's done mostly over video calls or instant messaging. So I think a lot of people are asking questions about how to communicate with their employees to get them to focus on outcomes and to be able to call them out when they hadn't delivered, but to do it in a way that was still nice, still human, and over a video call. So Michelle, do you want to start first, and then Ben, you can jump in?
Yeah, sure. So this one, I don't have a snazzy technology solution for you. This is very much an art of people management. And if I were to give something actionable for folks in the audience, I might share with them a simple feedback framework. It's called SBI. I'm sure many would have heard of you, but for those who haven't. So S stands for situation, B stands for behavior, and I stands for impact. And so in the case of someone's not met expectations, literally what you say to them is, I'll give an example. Mary, at the meeting this morning, on the virtual call this morning, firstly, you clocked in late, you logged in late, and so that was causing a little bit of stress on our part. And then when the presentation that you shared didn't accurately reflect the updates that we worked on until midnight last night. So, the context, that's a situation. It was this morning, you were late. The behaviors were, not only were you late, but you flashed the deck with wrong information. And the implications, the impact for that is that the clients now think we don't have our act together, right? And we may lose this business or not gain that business. Similarly, you can use this feedback to give positive reinforcements as well. So you could also, the same scenario, Mary, I just want to say that, I was really, really happy with what happened this morning. Not only did you work late last night, you were bright and early with a meeting, deck looked fabulous, you presented everything that we discussed amazingly. And as a consequence, I think we really knocked it out of the ballpark, and we're so going to get this client. Well done. So SBI can really be used very efficiently to give both constructive as well as positive feedback. And it really just helps people keep very focused on the behaviors and the impact that need to be adjusted to meet the required agenda or objectives. So that's just what works for us.
All right, great. Thank you for sharing, Michelle. Ben, anything to add to that?
No, I completely echo what Michelle was just saying, and this SBI framework and so on. I also think that this is not necessarily tools driven, this specific aspect, and what I think is that it's even more important in this case to learn how to handle the remote discussions and so on. So first, I would still advocate for video calls to be as first to make sure you are completely sincere. It's like the smiley, like laugh out loud or so on WhatsApp, whereas you're not even smiling yourself and so on. Which is okay, which is now becoming part of society, I guess. But I think when it comes to having a difficult discussion, there is no other way than to own it. And if it has to happen, first it can happen and be as constructive as possible. But second, it has to be, in my opinion, very sincere and so on. And it's even more important now than before to push on the soft skills, which are remote soft skills, basically. So leave a bit less room for interpretation, because no matter what are your intentions, the interpretation on the other end will almost always be negative or not the one you initially intended. So it's very important to make sure that if you're smiling while you are writing your email, I'm not saying put a smiley in the email. You could, by all means, but I'm saying make sure the words you say are extremely explicit in terms of your intention. If you're joking about something, first, maybe try to be careful with this and keep it for the calls and so on. But if you really want to be joking, sarcastic, ironic in an email, but in a positive sense, just make sure that it's very, very explicit. So same goes whenever you have a discussion about with someone who was not perform or not really reach the expectations and so on, and you want to make it clear and you want to discuss the subject, do a video call if possible. For me, that's the key rule. If you don't want for some reason, be extremely careful about the words you choose, because the good intentions you have will seldom be interpreted that way.
There's one more thing that kept coming up as well when attendees were registering was like company policies and trainings that should be implemented now to adapt to the new normal and to prepare the employees and the managers to continue managing or being productive during this new normal. And some of the questions were whether there should be like stuff like mental health days, extra communication training, for example, like Ben mentioned. People need to learn how to communicate their intentions as clearly as possible, where before you could chat in the pantry, now you can't. So since Ben, the spotlight's still on you on my laptop, do you want to start first? Like, what specific policies and training should companies apply? If you could give like one or two, and then we'll move to Michelle.
So, in terms of trainings, first, I think there are a lot of resources out there that are in different formats. I don't think you always need to go on a full-fledged training about any subject, in fact, until you are sure that it's really the right subject and until you really have the time to dedicate to it and you want to push further. So to me, in terms of training, I really advocate for, especially in this call. I think we have HR leaders, we have business leaders, and so on. And although and Sasha can attest to it, I think I'm fairly flexible and understanding and so on. At the same time, to me, training is always, I mentioned it earlier, is always heavy about building the muscle. It's about making something that is, I don't want to do it, just because you're not sure you will be able to do it. Actually, you don't know how you will perform. Therefore, the first reaction is a self-protection, I would say. And we see that not only in the professional life. I think I'm pretty sure everyone, if we give it 1 minute, everyone could come up with 3 examples where we pretended we didn't want to do something just because we are not sure we would manage actually to do it, even though we were maybe interested in doing it. So I believe that it's our role as managers, as business leaders, to make sure that everyone is building the muscle. So when it comes to training and policies, I would really blend them together. Say, okay, you have no choice. Every day, give me a comment on whatever objectives, or every week, give me a comment on whatever objective you have for the next quarter. And the first few days, the first few weeks, honestly, it will be painful. It will be seen as a constraint. It will be, and you even as a manager, you will see your own instruction as a constraint because you will have no time to go and check and so on. But in fact, you will soon realize that that's not even the point. The point is to have this mindset of continuously thinking about how to go further, how to do this and so on. So for me, it's the same in terms of the I was talking just before about the soft skills. I'm not sure it's easy. There are some trainings that are very good for soft skills, but a lot has to do with the own efforts we put it. We have it in us. It's all about do we actually care about the message and about how the message is conveyed. So I will really blend the two together and say, as a policy, pick a few things, again, 1, 2, 3 at a time maybe, and force it a bit at the beginning. Force yourself to do it and encourage your teams and follow up for them to do it. Very quickly, it becomes natural. Again, I remember one of the first webinars we did at the beginning of the MCO. It was about this person who was transformed into a potato, I think, during a Microsoft Teams meeting because he or she couldn't master the filters and so on. It's okay. Mistake, learn from the mistake, and next time you won't be a potato. Obviously, I hope you will just be yourself, not another kind of funny thing. But it's so many people couldn't use Zoom, or couldn't use Microsoft Teams, or even Google Meet for some reason, because everyone has their own habits and difficulties and so on. You use it 3-5 times, you're done. You know how to activate the webcam if it's not activated. You know how to make sure you are unmuted before you speak for 5 minutes. I hope I'm unmuted, by the way. It's the opportunity for me to check. Really, the point is to say, just do it. You will improve, and it will become part of your daily routine. It's the same as for joggers. Yeah, we might think it has nothing to do with business, but actually it's the same concept. If you really think you should be jogging, you really want to do something, or any kind of sport, by the way, just get there and do it again, and do it again. And very soon it will become a natural part of your day-to-day. So that's really how I like to see it, even in companies, even in the teams I managed and the companies I managed.
All right, cool. Thank you so much, then, Michelle. Anything to add to that?
Yep, so I might address this in a way that perhaps will also address some of the chat questions around change management and how do I fix it if the bosses aren't operating the way that I want them to be operating, and tying back to your original question of what skills should we be focused on in this time, right? The thought process that we have is that life is stressful as it is, right? Like life is pretty stressful with the current way. We really should help people focus on what skills are going to help them do what the work they actually need to do now, as well as prepare them for the future. So I'll give you a case in point. When I was in university, there were car maintenance courses, and then there was also a belly dancing course. And I was like, yeah, maybe learning how to maintain my car is actually a very useful skill, but belly dancing seems more fun, right? So I signed up for the belly dancing course, right? But if now in the middle of, I was doing a grocery run and my car broke down, I would definitely be on YouTube learning how to fix my tire, because like I need it at this point in time, right? So it's really about looking at meeting your employees and kind of understanding what is it that is happening right now that is a real pain point for you in getting the outcomes that you need, and what is the skill that you need to learn in order to bridge that gap. So, for example, it might be that communicating. It's a struggle for me to explain things virtually. It takes too long. People are tuning out, etc. And so then acquiring a video creation, creating simple explainer videos using technology out there that within 5 minutes you could key in what the objectives of the video are, and then using AI, it gives you accompanying images with some music, and within 10 minutes you literally have a 2-minute explainer video. That's literally how our explainer videos were created, using Lumen. And so then you've now become a video editor. You've now acquired video editing skills that you didn't have before, to address a specific need. So I think that's what it is. It's about focusing employees on what will help them now, because that's what's going to incentivize them to actually put in the extra effort. And if I may start addressing some of the chat questions, because I know we've gone slightly past the hour. Any time that there is a gap between where you want to be and where you currently are. So in one question, it was about, if management says one thing, but they're not practicing, and we as employees, we don't like it. Change management, how do we make it safe? Think about the people you're seeking to change the behavior of, whether it's upwards or downwards, if it's senior management. What is important in their world? What is important to them? How do you, again, frame the impact in a way that makes sense to them? So, for example, in the case of Layla, what is the impact when management and leadership doesn't have transparency, no trust, no accountability? How does that impact employees? And is there a way then for employees to say, when you don't demonstrate transparency, trust, accountability, you are getting less of our discretionary input. We are feeling demoralized. 70% of us, we did a random poll, and 70% of us are ready to quit if another company offered us pay. So if we don't start seeing these specific behaviors, then you're not going to get the best out of us. And how might we work towards getting the best outcome for this company? So really, really focusing everyone, I think, on what is the end game, if effort were to be put towards heading towards that direction, whether it's in applying themselves to learning a new skill or whatever the case may be to get to the desired state. And similarly for the cultural change, you first, in order to make it doable, you have to create that sense of urgency for why it's necessary. And then, identify the resistors among the population. So taking them one side and seeing whether you can have private conversations with them, or leveraging on influencers within the organization to perhaps be early adopters of the change. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, perhaps having some visible badges to indicate when people are acquiring the desired behaviors and signaling that, and rewarding the early adopters for when they do the right thing. So some thoughts that I had to round off the discussion.
I want to echo also what Michelle said, and maybe to add a perspective on this that I know we all tend to sometimes not realize it fully or believe in it enough to act. But to Layla's comment in our question, I think it's also sometimes important to note that managers, they don't know it all. So they have the same they go back home. Honestly, they are the same than everyone else. And when they get to work, same as well. So even though their role is different, maybe they are more senior for some things they have demonstrated, be it a great experience, be it great abilities, whatever is the reason they became a manager, it doesn't make them perfect on everything. So some managers might believe they are perfect on everything. That's difficult to manage. But for most of the managers I've worked with in my career and so on, they are happy to take cues as well. They're happy to be sometimes led towards what would work better for their team in terms of communication, in terms of solving maybe team conflicts. So we might believe sometimes that managers they foster the lack of transparency because there's kind of divide and conquer and so on. But actually, maybe if we ask this specific manager, they would say, "Oh, not at all. I didn't even notice, or I didn't know how to solve it," and so on. And then it's where do you have any suggestion and so on. And again, it's not always natural or easy to give a suggestion, to give feedback to the people we report to, but it's important to find a way to still do it, because in the end, the manager, even though honestly the reaction might be a knee-jerk reaction, like, no, it's okay, I don't need your input. 100% of the time, they will think about it and they will act on it and so on. So it's not easy, but we are now in a world, I think, where it's still. It depends also, of course, on some of the countries. You're from Morocco, Asia, other parts in the world, and so on. It's sometimes more or less easy to challenge or to approach the managers. It's sometimes more or less hierarchical, but more and more there is a move towards, I would say, flat hierarchy and so on. And so more and more people are receptive to this. So now it's finding the right spot to attack it, basically, in order to help the managers. It's sometimes difficult to have them listen, but it's even more difficult to have them listen if we don't tell them anything.
So, what first steps would you recommend middle management take to make change safe and more seamless?
So it really depends on where you start, for sure. But I'm coming back to one of the, in my opinion, very important precept of change management. Start with small changes. Start again. I feel I'm repeating myself. I'm sorry for that, but start building the muscle. So I've seen so many. So I've been a consultant with McKinsey, where we were in charge of fairly high stakes projects for big companies and so on. I've been working with Lazada, with CMS CGM. So I've been internal and external. I've seen a lot of things, and all the time, the change management was difficult when the plan was just too grand, not phased enough. I really believe that okay, you want to give more transparency in what everyone on the team is working on. Fine, maybe you put together a Trello board, and I don't know if you know Trello is a tool for kind of project management somehow, and it's actually a first step, and then just this act and make sure that then every day or every once in a while there is someone updating this board and someone updating the colleagues and so on. And then from there, again, now having the Trello board will become more natural. Then step 2, how do we then add the fact that every single person will update their own tickets on a daily basis, and so on and so on. And to me, that's really about this. The change management, the grand initiatives, it works. It works, obviously, and we need it and so on. But what's important is the path towards toward reaching the full implementation and the full adoption. Michelle shared a slide with impressive stats about adoption and so on. It's how do we make it easy for people to actually adopt a specific initiative. Start small. Start by things that are not too far from where you are right now, and build the muscle. A few days ago, we were invited by one of our clients, a big MNC, to address their employees about specifically this change management in terms of HR practices and so on. And it's really what we what resonated between us, me and my co-founder Nabil, and the audience was how do we phase it so that becomes natural, and then change itself will become part of the day-to-day habit. And once this is achieved, then change becomes easy. When I say easy, it's never easy. You always have to be thoughtful about it and so on. But the mindset of I'm okay to change is itself something that you can build.
Right, cool. Thank you, Michelle. Anything to add to that?
So, I mean, we're in the business partly of gamification, right? That's part of what our platform does. And contrary to what people think, gamification is not about making things fun. Yes, it's making things fun, but it's really relying on the human need to feel a sense of achievement. I mean, that's why during MCO, you could see suddenly people exercising a lot and like cooking a lot. In the midst of uncertainty, apart from all the spare time that they had, they wanted to demonstrate that they could tick things off, they could achieve certain things, even if their companies perhaps could go bankrupt, etc. And so when we're echoing what Ben said, making things achievable. When you set out to run a marathon, you're not going to sign up for 42 kilometers right away, right? So that's why you've got the stages of the 5 kilometers, 15, and then the 21 before the 42. And what it is in your organization, maybe some people are not ready to hit 5 kilometers even. So if it's even giving them rewards for doing 10 rounds around the block, which equates to 1.5 kilometers, understanding where everyone is on the journey and creating that safe space that you're not going to be left behind as long as you make the effort to get on board. One day you're going to hit the 42 kilometers, and we're going to help you with these milestones and reward you along the way, and provide a community of support, and that kind of thing. And then obviously continually rewarding and putting up as role models those who have gone before. So hey, Sasha, she hit her first 5 kilometers. She was the one that was dead set that she would never put on running shoes this year, but now she's hit her first milestone, and now she's signing up for 10 kilometers. Really constantly making it safe for people who are not marathon runners to get on the journey, and then providing visibility on their progress, I think is key to change management.